works. Good morning. Good morning. My name is Kevin Bouwmeester. I work at Google. I'm looking after the customer success in Benelux and Nordics for Apigee. And from that, I would like to share some best practices on what we have seen that works very well with customers on their API journey. And I'm actually joined on stage later by Dave Holliday from Maersk, and he will go through their API journey and their lessons learned with APIs. So let's get started. If this works, do it like this. So APIs are not new, right? So when I started 10 years ago, APIs were already there, and they're still here, and they're still used in roughly the same manner. But APIs have also been used slowly for something new, right? APIs were used internally, primarily to share data between systems. They were used then to open up an integration point to the web. The website needed data, and after that there were apps and IoT devices. There's maybe a Google Home that you talk to. And actually the next step that we're seeing is that APIs are also used for a new business model. APIs are the foundation for platforms or ecosystems. And that's actually where APIs start to do something new, right? The other stuff is still there and it will continue to be used, but we see that there's an opportunity to use APIs for this new business model. And if you look at an API in that, it's actually more than just a technical integration. It starts to become a product. And I wanted to share you a few examples, so let's leave that. So there's a few customers of ours that are actually having these APIs as products. So there's, for example, SurePay. They're a part of Rabobank, a Dutch bank. And they are offering a service that allows you to do a bank account number and a name check. So whenever you're transferring money as a Dutch bank customer, you actually are sure that if you make a mistake in the account name and the account number, there's at least a check that's being used, and this is a service that SurePay is actually offering to all kinds of Dutch banks. So SurePay's only offering is this API product. And that's how they're earning money. Another example is ABN AMRO, another bank, and they are more a traditional bank, but on top of that, they have started to do open banking, as they call it, and they have opened up a lot of APIs for different initiatives. And one of the most popular is called Tikkie. It's a payment request system that everybody can use in the Netherlands freely to send a payment request over WhatsApp. And that's free, so there's not a lot they get from that, but they've also turned it into a business model where they white labeling it and sharing it or selling it to other businesses. And the API as a product is the thing they sell, actually. And the last one is TomTom. I think they're speaking as well today. They're, of course, well known for navigation, for physical devices. But next to that, they are also having APIs. And their API products are also a big revenue stream for them, where they are giving all kinds of their customers access to routing, maps, and traffic information, right? And the APIs are the product for that. Does it work now? Not yet. So let's look a little bit further at what a product then really is, right? So we all know Lego, and I want to make a kind of an analogy to Lego. So if you look at the Lego brick, it's super easy to use, right? It has a few dots that you can use to connect it to other Lego bricks. It comes in a few forms and sizes, but with it you can create all kind of cool things like a ship. But a Lego brick itself is still very technical, right? And doesn't really speak to your imagination itself. And that's why Lego, as a company, isn't selling individual Lego bricks. If you go to a store, what they really sell is these boxes, which are labeled. They have beautiful pictures on them. They are packaged, the Lego bricks are packaged together with clear documentation on how to use those Lego bricks to actually build something. So documentation is important, but also it's something of the business. And the same thing should hold for an API. Don't really market your APIs individually, package them up, label them, come up with clear documentation for the APIs. And the API as a product should be owned by the business. So in order to do that, to have the business or have your organization think of APIs as products, something that is owned by the business, there's three mindset pillars, how we call it, that you should try to establish within the organization. And the first thing is outside-in thinking. It's no longer about that integration that APIs are helping you with. It's really about how you could help your customers. What problem are you solving for them? Start outside of your organization where you actually want to deliver something. And in order to do that, you should start small. You should have a speed to market, start small with an ID, an MVP probably, and then measure where this MVP is working or where it isn't, and iterate. And to iterate, you need to measure. You need to know how your APIs are working, how they're being used, and where they aren't used, and where there's tremendous or a lot of impact that you're making. So that actually comes down to some personas in the organization that you're working with. This mindset, this API mindset pillar needs to live within all the people in your organization. And there's 3 personas I want to highlight. There's the API consumer or the application developer. And this could be somebody inside your organization, an internal developer that's creating an internal app or an internal use case, something you want to launch as an organization. Or it could be somebody outside of your organization, a partner, or maybe an anonymous developer that's using your APIs. And this API consumer just wants to get things done. This API developer doesn't want to have a lot of friction. They don't want to have a lot of waiting time to get started. They want to have clear documentation, right? And that's easy to find, and easy to find out how the APIs or what APIs there are. And then there's the API developer, another developer, but this is more the API producer. Somebody within your organization, probably, that is thinking about how to expose those APIs and making the connections on what APIs belong together in the API product. And this API developer typically wants to have the tools to do this. So they want to have the security tools to actually protect these APIs, because it's probably exposing out data outside of the organization. They also want to set limits on how these APIs are being used, set quotas, how much calls can somebody really do. And then the third set of personas is really the API team. And that's where the API product manager is, who is managing the lifecycle of the API product. But that's also where the business is sitting, the business sponsor, the API architect who is designing the APIs. And this team really wants to get insights in how the APIs are being used. They want to monitor it, see analytics, and they also want to manage the lifecycle of the APIs, of the API products, from design to publication, to changing some stuff, to maybe monetizing it. They also want to measure the KPIs. How successful are we with APIs? And the thing is, you shouldn't really measure the amount of APIs or the amount of API calls. You should really measure things that impact the business here. It's about revenue that's generated by your API products. It's about the partners onboarded and the time to onboard a partner onto your company or the API products that you have. And those are the things that you actually want to measure. So that's all made possible by an API management platform. And the API management platform offers a few layers of services to all the different personas in the organization to actually help you deliver that mindset. So this is technology, and really the point I'm making is not only about technology, it's also about the processes and the people in your organization. But this will support it. So if you go from bottom to the top, we see that you need a runtime to run the APIs, obviously. But on top of that, you need a mediation engine to actually have the tools to expose APIs in a secure manner, in the right format, and also set limits on how you want to expose those APIs or how you want somebody to use those APIs. On top of that, you need clear analytics over the whole digital value chain, from end consumer to back end, to see the technical metrics, of course, if things are working as expected, if things are working as they should be, but also to get the business metrics out of that. What are we actually doing? How successful are we with our APIs? Are we doing the right APIs, or do we need to move to different ones? And on top of that, you want to build your ecosystem. So a very important place to market your API products. Like Lego is doing in the toy store, API products are marketed or made visible or sold at the developer portal, where they can be found, where the documentation is, where you can get ideas on what to build with the APIs. And the developer portal is actually the shop for API products. So things you should think of in the developer ecosystem is a catalog, but also SDKs probably that you want to give to your developers. Monetization, if you want to charge for API calls, you could set up a monetization mechanism on top of the APIs exposed through the developer portal. And with that, you build your API marketplace. Possibly your own APIs or third-party APIs that you want to include in your developer portal. So with that, I guess we have a pretty good idea on what's the direction to go within your organization, what kind of mindset you need, but also what kind of people are needed in that. And also we talked a little bit about the technology that's needed. So I'd like to invite Dave Holliday on stage. He will go through that same journey that Maersk is going through, actually, and the kind of things they learned around it. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Good morning, Nordic APIs. My name is Dave Holliday. I'm the Maersk API Management Platform Product Owner inside Maersk. This morning, I'll be talking to you about a few things, short introduction to Maersk for those of you that aren't familiar with Maersk itself. We're then going to talk about our API journey, why APIs are so important to Maersk. We're then going to look at the mistakes that Maersk has made on our journey through APIs. And then I'll talk to you a bit about what really makes a decent API management platform and what that means to Maersk, and then look at some next steps for the platform. So for those that are unaware, Maersk is the global integrator of container logistics. We connect and simplify customers' global supply chains through containerized transport of goods. A supply chain, for those that are unaware, is an interconnected set of entities, customers, partners, and parties that take raw materials and convert them into prized commodities, into sellable commodities through that chain. And that chain is very important, that chain of integration, moving data, moving physical goods. So we can go from that digital value chain to the digital supply chain. Maersk is split into 4 main business areas. The one that anybody will be familiar with today is our ocean part. And this is our network of 800 vessels, global trade routes around the world, moving a huge amount of containers every year. We have some of the world's largest vessels carrying around 18,000 containers at a time. And this is the ocean part of our business. Logistics and services part of our business deals with any movement of a container that isn't the ocean move. So this is anything that happens inland, anything that's moving the containers from any warehousing or distribution locations to a terminal. That's our logistics and services. We also have terminals and towage as part of our organization. So we have the APM Terminals brand, which owns 76 terminals around the world. And really a terminal is providing that interface between a vessel and any of the inland services with the movement and management of the containers. We also have a manufacturing arm to our business called Maersk Container Industry. The Maersk Container Industry manufacture refrigerated or reefer containers and the dry containers. So really Maersk support the full end-to-end life of a container. So why are APIs so important to Maersk? Why am I standing here today talking to you guys? Well, first off, we have to understand how global supply chains work today. And really, unfortunately, this is how most of the supply chains work. This is an EDI 315 ocean status details message. It gets generated by a bunch of different systems anytime a container moves around the world. Any particular event that takes place, if it's loaded on board a vessel, if it's discharged from a vessel, if you get a gate in or a gate out, it's put on board a truck, whatever that is, one of these files will be generated and moved around the world, either with FTP, SFTP, AS2, a bunch of different transport protocols. Ultimately, though, it's a hideous message, very hard to consume, and it's very expensive to develop against on both the Maersk side and the customer side. For anybody who knows anything about EDI, you'll understand that there's only a standard in that everybody implements the standard differently. What we really want to be able to do is to express ourselves like this, right? A classic JSON data. It's essentially got the same data as the previous response, as the previous message, but significantly easier to develop against, significantly easier to understand, and significantly cheaper and easier for people to integrate with. So what we see being a huge value in being able to integrate all the parts of the supply chain through modern data methods, through modern methods of integration. APIs aren't new for Maersk particularly. We've been thinking about APIs for the last couple of years, and it all really started with the wish to build a more highly available Maersk.com customer experience. And from the rebuild of our Maersk.com experience, we started to embrace microservices. We built a highly available platform for the microservices based on Kubernetes, and we built out a bunch of APIs. Now, those APIs predominantly for our own build of our web applications on Maersk.com. So for our schedules application, tracking application, parts of our booking applications, we rebuilt those web apps. And we built them with APIs underneath. And really what happened was we then had some APIs. Customers started to have a conversation with us, mentioning APIs in QBRs and a bunch of different things. And we said, well, actually, we've got some APIs here. How about we just start sharing them with customers? And we just started sharing these APIs with customers, but we didn't properly at that time appreciate what it takes to build a platform or a management structure or a proper externalization of those APIs. And these are some of the mistakes that we made along the way. First off, this is our developer portal. It's responsive, loads in about 5 milliseconds, and works in all major web browsers. But it's not the most optimum developer experience. It's kind of the opposite, really. This is just a fun take. What we're doing at the moment, we're working with Google Apigee to build a new, beautiful, branded developer portal. It will come online in the next few months. But it's just what we never really appreciated was what it takes to build that externalized developer-facing experience. And actually, it's taken a huge amount of work to understand what that should look like, what that journey should be, how to onboard onto the APIs. There's an awful lot of things to think about in that space. The next one is the first bit of customer feedback we had on our Schedules API. The Schedules API provides information of when Maersk can ship between... Martin's laughing in the front row. He used to work for Maersk. He knows this problem. What the Schedules API takes is it shows you the Maersk shipping schedules between 2 locations. So you can use the API to work out when can I bring my container to port and Maersk will successfully move that container for me. Now, these APIs I mentioned before were built for our own web applications. And our own web applications, because we're working in the Maersk landscape, understand GeoIDs. GeoID is a unique representation for a particular location inside all the Maersk systems. Works in tracking systems, booking systems, different transport management systems, and it all works really fine. But funnily enough, our customers don't have the Maersk GeoID. And we gave the API out to one of the customers, and they immediately went, what on earth is this GeoID? We can't integrate with that. Turns out inside the supply chains that really we should be representing locations as UN location codes rather than GeoIDs. There's an interesting takeaway here that when we're looking at externalizing APIs and working out in the wider market, we need to be embracing those industry standards inside the API design to make it interoperable and easy to consume. The next one is just a miss on how to really what the customers need from the API and how that API should be used by the customers. So we built an API. It was great for us. We were talking to customers about it, and a bunch of people were starting to consume that and really understanding the data and getting some value from that. And then, of course, we had some other customers that are wanting to integrate the API into their transport management system or into their ERP solution. And that means that actually they're making requests for loads of containers at the same time. And of course, the answer with the initial API was no. We can't request 10,000 containers at a time. You can make 10,000 individual requests, but you can't request 10,000 at a time. So there's an interesting takeaway here. We need to really understand how the API will be used by the consumer of the API and in which scenarios it will be being used in. This is an interesting one. We can't access the API. All of our API traffic flows through a web application firewall. A web application firewall provides us DDoS protection, bot management, client reputation, a bunch of really wonderful things. We got a bit overzealous one day and started blocking all of the traffic coming out of any AWS infrastructure, which was really fun because customers started to complain they couldn't access the API themselves. We thought it was absolutely fine, because we could access it. Our monitoring was fine. Everything was up. We don't do a huge amount in AWS at all, so we didn't see a particular problem, but the customers saw the problem. And as we all know, a customer reporting a problem before you know the problem is a bad thing. So we messed around with the web application firewall and gave them access. Again, this is there's a learning here in how and where the API is going to be consumed from. All of these things need to be considered to build strong externalized APIs. Here's an English nursery rhyme that indicates the next mistake, which is old Mother Hubbard went to the cupboard to give the poor dog a bone. When she came there, the cupboard was bare, and so the poor dog had none. Interpreted in this mistake is Dave, me, went to the API platform to give the poor business a bone. When he came there, the authorization header was bare, and so the poor business had none. What we essentially did when we went out to market with these APIs, talked to our customers, is we didn't really appreciate API keys or authorization headers, client credentials grant, any of that flow to really identify and understand who is calling these APIs. So when we came back a bit later upon success of some of these APIs, lovely, we couldn't work out who was calling them. Who is using these APIs? We know they're successful, there's a bunch of traffic, but who is calling them? We have absolutely no idea. That led to a reasonably frenzied effort to work out through API keys, but that meant enforcing the API keys is a breaking change to the API, needs conversations with all the consumers, massive pain. Think very carefully about how you go to market with the APIs to make it as successful as possible. Also make sure you don't make any major changes immediately. So what does API management mean inside Maersk? API management has really two flavors for us. We have an internal flavor and an external flavor. So the internal flavor is providing for the Maersk technology organization, which is over 1,000 people, covering our business side, covering everything that's inside Maersk. And this is for teams building APIs, building modern products across the supply chain, building all of our different tooling inside Maersk. And what we're going to provide as part of the API management platform is the ability to discover what exists today in the estate and what other teams are working on. We want teams to avoid duplication. We want to enhance reuse. We also, because we are a 24/7, 365 organization, a bunch of our APIs are absolutely business critical. We have to provide support layer around these APIs. And really that's around providing the metadata and the data around each of these APIs. Who built the API? Where is the code base? How is it tested? What's the first line support? What's the second line support? What's the third line support? What's the stack for each one of these APIs? Is it using a common stack? Is this something that's been built in an ancient mainframe system that could go down all the time? There's a bunch of different things there. And our API management platform will be providing that information to very quickly triage issues when they arise. Also, we want to provide seamless deployment of the API proxies so that teams can mess around and build out new proxies in our playground environment and then seamlessly and easily deploy them through our higher environments. We also have to provide the analysis and the data for those APIs, building upon that mistake we made previously, but especially around errors. And I want to highlight that here, that the error data is actually sometimes more useful than the success data. A bunch of 200 OKs, rather lovely, but actually in, say, the instance of our schedules API, if we get a bunch of 404s for schedule not found, it actually could indicate that our customers are searching for products that we don't provide today. Schedules basically provides the two port calls. If customers are searching for ports that we don't serve today, and the API is returning a 404, it could actually indicate that we need to build a new product in that space. That we should offer a new sailing between those ports and could offer a huge amount of market information even through the errors that the API generates. On the external side, this, I'm sure, is well known to everybody here, but we want to be providing best-in-class developer portal experience. So the ability to discover and search for Maersk's APIs. And external here are customers, third parties, platforms to Maersk. And really want to search and discover those APIs. We need then the people coming to our developer portal to understand, is this API going to be right to meet our business case? Is this going to provide value inside my supply chain? Is this going to strengthen and tighten up the integration for my systems? And that's what customers will be testing. I want all of this to happen in a self-service way. I don't want to be involved in every single customer integration. I want everything to be as self-service as possible. And also, once we're happy with these APIs, once we've built a rich ecosystem around the APIs, there's always the opportunity to start monetizing some of this traffic. It's not the initial focus, but it's definitely something that we're fantastic to have available to us. Attaching a dollar value to every API call will be exceptionally useful. So what is Maersk API management? Well, for us, it's really 4 things. We're going to be building an API that wraps all of the different architectural layers and provides the automation around the platform. And that's for internal developers to access if they want to integrate with the platform. We're also going to be building a CLI, so that if they've got particular pipelines or command line interfaces that they need to use, they can use our CLI in order to interact with the platform. We'll also have an internal portal, which will provide all of the rich search, discovery, testing capability that we need for our internal developers. And of course, the external developers and the different developer portals catering for the different Maersk brands. As part of the management platform, we'll be providing teams with 4 environments. The first is a playground environment where people can mess around and they can understand really what they're building. We can do training on the platform. We can do shared global training with people in the platform. And then we'll be providing the strong API-driven and CLI-driven mechanism to push anything from playground up through the higher environments. So, what's next for us? First off, we have to migrate all of the existing APIs from all over Maersk onto this new platform. And from my initial investigations, we have around 500 different APIs, some SOAP, some REST, some weird and wonderful, that we'll be bringing into this management platform so that we can really give a true and fair picture of all of the integrations inside Maersk, all the integration opportunities inside Maersk as well. And then we're going to be looking at a few more interesting things, doing open API specification parsing for teams so that we can deeply understand what's happening inside the API, making sure that we help teams to follow industry standards where they're available. We have a wonderful collaboration inside Maersk with the Digital Container Shipping Association, which is driving out modern web-based standards for supply chains. And we want to make sure that teams are building APIs following those standards, and our platform will help to guide them on that journey. We also want to build shared flows, shared policies, anything that's kind of globally shared amongst different teams, things like security flows, analytics, monitoring, that kind of stuff. Of course, we need to train teams on the platform, and we need to automate everything. Our own platform inside Maersk will be entirely self-service for all of the teams. Again, I don't want to have to talk to every single development team about all of their needs. We want everything to be as self-service as possible, so we need to automate everything. This is just a fun picture of ducks that I found. So thank you. Thank you for your time this morning. My name is Dave Holliday. This is my email address. Come and have a chat with me. I'll be around all today, or send me an email. Thank you.